Does everybody have a ticket for the drawing? Tonight's prize is from Uptown Coffee. It's a gift certificate. Okay. Tonight we have a special guest, Jerry Stauffer from Powhatan, Farmville, Cumberland, down that direction. And he's going to be with us tonight. And I'm going to give you a little bit of information to set the stage for the date or the time we're dealing in, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jerry. As you can see, he and several others have brought lots of stuff for everybody to look at, so feel free to get up and look at it, check it over, stay around after the meeting and look it over. When we started working on this show, I thought, well, when did the railroads really start? And it seems that about 1812, the railroads started. And I'll read you a couple of these slides and then we'll move on. The earliest railroads constructed were actually horse-drawn cars running on tracks used for transporting freight. First to be chartered and built was the Granite Railway of Massachusetts, which ran approximately 3 miles. The first regular carrier of passengers and freight was Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. That was completed in 1827. It was not until Christmas Day of 1830 when the South Carolina Canal and Railroad Company completed the first mechanical passenger train. The modern railroad industry was born. So really, we're talking about 1830 on up to around 1900. The industry would have a profound effect on the nation in the coming decades, often determining how an individual lived his life. By 1935, dozens of local railroad networks had been put into place. Each one of these tracks went no more than a few miles, but the potential for this mode of transportation was finally being realized. With every passing year, the number of the railroad systems grew exponentially. By 1850, over 9,000 miles of track had been laid. Along with the proliferation of the railroads came increased standardization of the field. In other words, there were little trains and there were big trains. An ideal locomotive was developed which served as a model for all subsequent trains. Various companies began to cooperate with one another to both maximize profits and minimize expenditures. The interaction of various companies initiated the trend of conglomeration which would continue through the rest of the 19th century. In 1850, the New York Central Railroad Company was formed by the merging of dozens of small railroads between the Hudson River and the Buffalo. Single companies have begun to extend their railroad systems outside of the local domain between 1851 and 1857. The federal government issued land grants to the Illinois to construct the Illinois Central Railroad. The government set the precedent with this action and fostered the growth of one of the largest companies in the nation. With the onset of the Civil War, production of the new railroads fell dramatically. At the same time, however, usage of this mode of transportation increased significantly. By conclusion of the war, the need was even more diverse of the railroads was extremely apparent. A new age was born. Small railroad companies would die or be absorbed by the large businesses. So as Jerry gives his talk tonight, we're going to talk about the Chesterfield Railroad, which was around 1840, the Winterpark Railroad, which they were trying to build, but they never built it. That was in the 1840, 1842 range. The Clover Hill line, which was 18 miles long, was around 1844. We had the Richmond and Petersburg Railroad. In 1877, Clover Hill was sold to become part of the Bright Hope Mining Company or the Bright Hope Railroad. That's where Farmville comes into the picture. It was interesting to note, Jerry, I read where at one point the Bright Hope was a full-size railroad, but later became a narrow gauge system. You want to tell them why? Do you know what?
I'm assuming to maximize profits.
Well, they were full-size trains, but they kept losing their cars. Their cars would get, left somewhere and they'd never get them back. So they went to a narrow gauge that nobody else could use them on the big tracks.
That makes sense.
That's what the article said I read. Two more slides. The end of the Chesterfield County coal business was in sight in May of 1883 when the shipment from the Pocahontas coal field in western Virginia arrived at Norfolk over the Norfolk and Western. Pocahontas coal was cheaper, better than the Chesterfield coal, and it soon took over the market. We had the same trouble in Farmville. Farmville had coal, but it didn't burn too hot. In 1887, Worth and his backers formed the Bermuda 100 Construction Company, which was chartered by the General Assembly to build railroads, bridges, and other transportation facilities. The principal objective of the company was to build an extension of the Bright Hope. The Farmville and the Powhatan Railroad had been chartered in 1884 to build a line from Farmville to Mosey's Crossing on the Richmond and Danville in southwestern Chesterfield. A lot of words there. We'll get a little bit clearer explanation of that. Although the S&P charter did not call for a connection with the Bright Hope, it was apparent that the two lines would eventually become one narrow gauge system. The incorporators of the Farmville and Powhatan were local businessmen, but they hired the Bermuda 100 Construction Company to build the railroad and paid for the work in corporate bonds. In 1889, the Farmville and Powhatan purchased the Bright Hope Railroad. In the next year, the two lines were linked to form a narrow gauge line 93 miles long from Farmville to Bermuda 100 with a branch going over Epps Falls. So that brings us to Farmville and the narrow gauge. A lot of people, I didn't know for a long time, that 550 feet from here, or about 2 blocks over on that little street right there, was the beginning of the narrow gauge railroad, and it ran from right here at the doorstep all the way to the James River at Bermuda 100, which is near Hopewell, right?
Yeah, it's in Chesterfield. Yeah.
So, Road 5.
So we were the beginning, or you could say the end of the 93-mile track. Here on the left, in this left picture here, that is the station that stood in Farmville for many, many years. I think Bob Flippin and Billy Poston took this picture just before the town tore that station down, and it was right over here, right across from us. And the picture on the right is the other end of the 93 miles, which was on the James River, place called Bermuda 100. Lastly, about in 2015, Ray Gaskins, who we all know, wrote 3 articles in the Farmville Herald about the Farmville Coal and Iron Company. And I'll show you the 3 articles. They're available over at Longwood if you want to see them, read them in detail. But it's basically about they tried to build a big coal company here in Farmville, right over here on the Plank Road. And the governor of Virginia, who lived in Farmville, about a block right over there, near that gray house, right in the corner, Governor McKinley, he came to Farmville to the old Prince Edward Hotel, several meetings at the hotel and out on the front porch, stormed around town and got everybody that he could that had money to buy stock in this Farmville Coal and Iron Company. And the people in Farmville put a lot of money into it, and everybody around here thought Farmville was going to be a boom town. There's a picture of the hotel they planned to build over Lithia Springs over on Osmond Road. They bought all the land, which later became First, Second, Third Avenue. That was going to be the homes for the people that were going to come here with the railroad. Part of the land they bought was what is now Westview Cemetery. Well, it turned out the whole thing was a bust. They built the railroad up here. They started some of the coal mines, but it didn't go over good because the coal didn't burn hot enough. At the same time, we had the railroad that ran right there, High Ridge Trail now. That was the Norfolk and Southern, or the Norfolk and Western Railroad, and they were hauling coal from West Virginia, which was better than the Farmville Coal. So the Farmville Coal and Iron Company folded up after 4 years. And some of the land became a cemetery out there. And it was a good number of years later, I'd say 10, 15, 20 years later, before they developed the avenues, and those lots were just sold off to private individuals. But that's how Farmville kind of got involved in the railroad and the coal business. Obviously, the railroad didn't go over good. They came back, put the tracks up, and that was the end of the narrow gauge. There's also mentioned in that ad, and here's a little short blurb about it, the Southern Railroad was for the Orange and Keysville Railroad, and that was supposed to be built, and it was going to connect to the station right here, at the end of Appomattox Street, and it would go around behind the firehouse, go over to High Street, go all the way up, basically weaving around the Hampton-Sydney Road. It would have gone through the Hampton-Sydney football field, through Hampton-Sydney, and on up to Abilene Road to Keysville. They graded a lot of the property, but they never laid the tracks. And after 30 years of trying, the man gave up, gave all the right-of-ways to Hampton-Sydney College, and that spurred the development of the Hampton-Sydney Road on that right-of-way. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jerry and let him tell you this. Jerry Stauffer, I met him over in Cumberland, and I said, Jerry, after the meeting, I said, come on up to Farmville, let me tell you what we have, the other part of the story. So he came, and he got over Bob Flickman, and since then, he's been on what I call an adventure. Let's see if I can open it up here.
Photoshop's amazing. I never saw the hat till tonight.
That's Jerry.
See?
We're going to talk about Jerry's adventures and his research. And let's see. I've got a book going around. Jerry's not an author by any means, but he works at Office Depot, and he puts these books together. And all his research on this railroad project has taken him in a lot of different directions. But you got some of those books for sale tonight.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody that wants a book to take home with them, see Jerry after the meeting. He'll look you up with one. That's about what it costs you to make them.
Yeah.
Okay. He'll talk to you.
$22.40 a piece. So we just rounded it up, $25 so generous, not just kidding. little Jerry is my treasurer right here, so anybody who wants one, I just wanted to be able to share that information.
Jerry works over at Office Depot, that's why he's able to make those books. But it's true. Took him to a match factory. Let's go back there. Took him to a brick factory, coal mine, and even to a cemetery. Start off by telling him go to a brick factory.
All right. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for coming out. It makes me feel like just an absolute amazing person for the little bit of work I've done to research history, so thank you for coming to hear this. This is not an area I would ever venture into. Made the serious mistake, the property owner is not a fan of anybody on his land, but at any rate, that is where the Powhatan Clay Manufacturing Company is located at. It was like an 800-acre facility, if I'm not mistaken. That exact brick is, I believe, right there. So, to me, the most significant part of this is that it was on the Chesterfield-Powhatan line. It was a mile and a half away from where our F&P T&W would have crossed over the Southern Railroad. But that particular brick right there is white salt and pepper brick. And when a building in New York City or Baltimore or Chicago was wanting the salt and pepper brick, 80% of the time it came from Powhatan, Virginia, including the Jefferson, including the Railroad Museum downtown, where I'm speaking on the 21st of October, everyone's free. That is what we believe to be the flood kiln. Is that what we termed that? Does that sound right? But some of these bricks, you have to wonder if it was part of that, because they actually have melt look to them. I really couldn't say. But this year, if you look at the far right, that would have been one of the smokestacks, one of which still exists today. I think the next slide is that. But this middle picture here, you can actually see them rolling on little rails, the bricks to the kilns, which is quite unique. That's an even better picture of it right there. You're talking, that's not flat rail, but it's even smaller than I would consider mining rail. What do you say, Ken?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but at this particular factory was the one at Powhatan. Some of the pictures that you may see, I believe, were of the Richmond facility. Yeah, that's Richmond. So, needless to say, I don't know a whole lot about that facility per se. I just know that when the clay that they were demanding, which is the white clay out of Powhatan, started to dissipate, they moved the factory into, whoa, hey, should I turn that down or? Is this me?
Yeah.
Hello? Hello? All right. Whoa. All right, so this is a little bit better picture of the one that was on the far right. And the next picture, there we go. That is what I believe to be the base. At the time that we took this picture, the house was actually being built. They were going to take this down. The current owner next door talked them into leaving it. I don't know the current status, but it's really neat to see that, 105 years after this brick company went out of business, it was so impactful to us as a railroad, even though it was a mile off our track. It is quite amazing. The Clover Hill Plantation in Chesterfield. So, might as well as mention that the gentleman sitting in the front row here is Ken Shiflett, one of my very good friends. He's done some extremely hard work. And this is a picture of the house at Clover Hill Plantation where we met with the Commonwealth of Virginia, multiple other county presidents of the historical societies, including Jimmy, but that house was built, I believe, in 1775. Does that that sound right, Ken? And these are some pictures. Thank you. Good job. See, yes, and this is what we would consider some really high-grade coal. Unfortunately, I was a little short on the memory stick today and didn't bring the bag with me, but you can see it's got more of a mirrored effect. My son and I were discussing how when it breaks open, if it's more of a salt and pepper look, even though it's really shiny, it's not quite as high quality. It's more of like your middle grade coal. This is a picture of looking into the Bright Hope mine shaft. I don't believe you took this picture, did you, Ken? Yeah. You did? Okay, so Ken took that picture. I don't believe that location is on the Chesterfield Coal Company location, is it? No. Okay. This is the east building, which would be the closer one to the house, furthest from the road. It was at a time where the water level was really high. I was just in a frenzy to try to get this book together, but you can see all of the land that was excavated away. This is the west building, and for Ken 4 years ago to have walked up to this part of the, can you pause it for 1 second, Jimmy? Go forward a slide, please. This is the part, right? So 4 years ago or so, Ken walked up to this part of the land and noticed there was bricks exposed and started digging. I don't even have words to describe what he did. So that's quite incredible. Everybody that I've taken out there and have seen, you know, their expressions are just blown away by it. That leads us to the next thing that Ken did. So the nearby match factory. This was any of you who have ever heard the story of this match factory, it's almost skin crawling how poisonous the phosphorus was on these matches. This here is Ken and Mark Sowers, the owner of the property. He is the owner of, I believe, the whole Harper's Mill plantation, like all of that development. He has preserved this at Ken's request, and we'll see more about that here in a second. Is it the next slide? No. So Ken, question for you. I saw this today. Is that the same strike safety anywhere match that we're talking about, or is this after? Okay, because this was called the Lucifer match? Right. Okay. Lucifer will fall. Okay, so at any rate, that's probably one of the better pictures we have. We will show a video here in a second that Ken put together, but you can see some of the pylons that held the machinery, and this building had no floor, which to me is quite incredible. You just wouldn't think of that. It had 14-foot high ceilings. It was completely ventilated. This is a little story about the actual phossy jaw disease that you can catch. Do you want to pause it and I'll read it, or?
You can just tell them.
All right, so phossy jaw, essentially what this is you're, by inhaling the fumes of this phosphorus, it would essentially take over your bones, and especially up in your jaw. It ended up making your bones glow green at night, which is why, as a present to Ken, he already saw it when I spray painted a rail from there to glow in the dark green, kind of freak everybody out. But is this mic keeping on going out, or is it just me?
Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. But at any rate, did you skip that?
We're going back. The next slide will come up. It's going to play a video that will give you a lot of explanation.
Yeah, in 2012, Ken put together a video, quite informative. It's been viewed by, you know, counties, Commonwealth officials. I just think that's really, really cool. So if you want to go ahead and play that.
It'll work, yeah.
So, the path of the Farmville and Powhatan Railroad. It connected with the Bright Hope Railroad in 1890. This siding leads to the remnants of the American Manufacturing Company. It's located 1/4 mile west of Colville Road, Route 664, and a short distance north of Beach Road, Route 655, in the Winterpop section of Chesterfield County, Virginia. The ruins are now part of the Parker's Mill development. Only a few people are aware of this factory, and they know nothing about it. It has virtually escaped attention and was overlooked by history. It's unusual a factory this size with all the modern technology to be built in a rural area away from all the amenities of the city. Owned by F.C. Denning Jr. of New York, the company made the striking wear matches which used the poisonous white phosphorus for the ignition of the 2.5-inch flint. Up to 20% of the employees that work in match factories would die from the fumes of white phosphorus, which cause neurosis of the jaw and brain damage. The matches they made would burst into flames at the slightest provocation, sending flying particles in all directions. Originally called the lucifer, it was best known as the polar match. Due to the carelessness of the user, it has caused thousands to burn to death and millions of dollars in property damage. The insurance industry referred to them as criminal matches. According to urban legend, this extremely large facility and the other buildings associated with it burnt down in the 1920s. Built in 1902 near the abandoned Colville Depot, it was called the Colville Plant. All archaeological plans concerning match factories since 1900 were issued by the federal government. It closed in 1912, 100 years ago, the same year Congress finally acted, forcing the industry to switch over to safety matches. The significance of these remains represent an end of an era that lasted for 8 decades. The site has been carpeted with trees and abused by Mother Nature. Vines, fallen trees, and large branches have draped the cement and brick structures, causing some damages. The ground level concrete supports were encased with 1 to 2 feet of tree roots, dirt, and broken bricks. Now nearly all the concrete slabs have been exposed. Not counting the corrugated tin roof, the building had numerous windows and was at least 20 feet in height. These pyramid-shaped pillars supported large steel beams that held up the massive ceilings. There are 39 of them with 2 additional feet underground. While the sprinkler system had to be 14 feet above the floor. Above the water pipes in the attic was ductwork and fans to draw out the poisonous fumes. Also, there are 4 pyramid pillars for the water tower, which had to be 11 feet above the sprinkler head. The tank had a capacity of 5,000 to 7,000 gallons. The huge boiler room was the most troubling area to excavate due to the smaller trees that was here, and the bricks would crumble just by touching them. Nearby, the metal smokestack was 50 inches wide and 80 feet tall. This concrete slab is at least 3 feet thick. 80 feet in comparison is about the height of this pine tree.
It's gone, right? The concrete. In the last 7 years.
These bolter-shaped supports were for machinery that weighed 7 to 9 tons.
Offloaded off the train. In the early 1900s.
The curvature of this motor suggests that a conveyor belt turned an engine wheel that was 9 feet wide. Electricity did not enter this section of Winterpop until 1950. However, the factory had a generator for its electrical needs. A 6-foot wide boiler was on this slender support. Portions of boards are still visible, which were encased in the foundation. There is an identical base near the coke mine. It too supported a 6-foot wide boiler for making the white phosphorus. Coke, sand, and phosphate rock was needed to make the waxy chemical. A pile of phosphate rocks. 48 feet from the factory, which has caved in. This air shaft, which was 4 feet by 4 feet, erosion of the side walls had given the appearance of a small pond, approximately 10 feet to a false bottom. The cafeteria had to be separate from the factory building. It had hot and cold running water and restrooms. For those who did not live in the city, there was no such luxury. Construction was 2,400 square feet. When the major mines closed in Winnipeg in 1890, many miners moved away. Originally, the owner had plans to build 20 houses for legal immigrants. Instead, the 2-story was built with 20 rooms. This partly filled basement was used to store the white phosphorus, which had been underwater. The walls were brick lined. There was no flooring. There is one other building affiliated with this factory. In 1903, the owner had a home office type built 1,000 feet east, so he would have a place to stay when he visited. This too was burned down. Over the years, we have amassed a large museum.
Some of those pieces are here today, except for that big piece of rails in my front yard.
This nameplate is in excellent condition. Jane Biggs made impression rolling machines that print labels on matchboxes. Speaking of impressions, wooden beams were secured in these concrete slots. Note the contour of tree rings. Finally, this phosphate rock, note the imprint of the borax, which were delivered in 200-pound bags.
He owns that piece of
In
phosphate rock.
1907, the U.S. population was approximately 87 million people. This country was using an enormous amount of matches, 750 billion a year. That's 8 matches for every man, woman, and child. Forests were being decimated because the splints had to be straight grain, no knots, and the choicest of wood. Now, thanks to Mr. Wilson Carter for all his help. This is Ken Shepherd of the Chesterfield Historical Society. Thanks for watching.
So I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second, and I was talking about the bossy jaw. I don't know if you can see this, but this came from the map then you see how it's shining green? I'm just kidding, it's great for glow in the dark paint. I just wanted to freak everybody out. But that's what we're talking about. Your jaw would have actually glowed green. Your hardened, has everybody eaten?
No.
You would actually digest some of the excretions. It would be so cumbersome for a physician to help you because of the stench. Typically, amputation was the only solution, and in a lot of cases, we're estimating 20% or so of these people contracted the disease that worked in these factories, and a lot of them, when they caught the disease, committed suicide, and particularly women, because of the fact that in 1910 you just had your jaw removed. I mean, yeah, so suicide, sad thing. But not to end on a low note with the match factory, because it's quite incredible. The work that he has done to keep that looking like that is incredible. Unfortunately, that big concrete slab he was referring to, we noticed a week ago, 2 weeks ago, is gone. It's part of what you deal with when you have multiple property owners, one, multi-millionaire, one local homeowner, and honestly, you have no idea what happened. It's just a huge, couple thousand-pound piece of concrete is gone. And it's sad, but at any rate.
Tell them what to build right next to it.
So, that's a great point. I don't know if the picture is in here at all. However, in the book, it will show the layout for Harper's Mill, the subdivision. And Harper's Mill subdivision kind of has a turn / cul-de-sac type of deal right there, and it goes house, nothing, house. And you just have to wonder, what's that nothing? And that's the match factory. So Mark Silvers, or Sowers, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but he is the owner of all that property, and he has allowed for that to remain unbuilt up. And to back up a little further as to the significance to this sits exactly on the location where your Clover Hill / Bright Hope line would have ran southbound, and until 1884 it wasn't even thought of to go up Colborough Road. For those of you that have ever been there, there's a Y in Colborough Road. Well, when you take the left Y, if you were to just ignore the stop sign and run into the woods, you would be on the railroad bed and ultimately in the match factory. So this was very dependent on this railroad. If this railroad didn't exist, they wouldn't have existed. F.C. Danini, who was the owner of tons of land down there, including the Chesterfield Coal Company, including parts of Swift Creek, like the reservoir area, if I'm not mistaken, Magnolia Green, that subdivision type of region. And I just think it's really unique that you can look at something from over 100 years ago and see, like, I'm 40, and when I moved into my house and I realized the significance of this railroad, that what I thought ran in front of my house ultimately ran in back of my house, and I just started digging, first with a shovel, second with the internet, and I took these two. One is my brother-in-law, hey John, and this is my son Jerry, he's 12. We love metal detecting, and we have been able to take a newspaper article that shows that there was an accident in one spot and relatively narrow it down, and we have broken pieces of the train. It's really unique. But back to the Colborough thing, because I like to deviate from where I was at, because I can jibber-jabber. Go ahead and move to the next slide, and I'll just keep jibber-jabbering.
Okay. Talking about walking around down there.
Oh, sure. So that, again, is the same building Jimmy was referring to that was right over here. My son and I and brother-in-law were down there earlier this afternoon. There's nothing to see. It's gone. I'm so sorry. Standing in your way. It is gone. However, right here is a map that shows its exact location. So we are here. That was where the building was. Ever so importantly, slightly above what would have been floodplain, except for the 72 flood or whatever it was. I'm sure that would have been horrible. However, this would have been the turntable for where the train kind of backed in and did a... This would be the turntable right here. However, it was news to me tonight how they have operated. I'm sorry, I can't remember your first name, but you were mentioning that you might know how it backed in. Right?
Yes.
But anyway, so this is current High Bridge Trail, and what's unique about this here is Longwood's Megaplex.
See where the railroad tracks will come in and whatnot.
Okay, well, yeah. So that's the F&P right there at T&W. That would have started in 1890-ish, 1891, most likely. It didn't start actually running out of Coleborough. I know they started establishing in 1884, so 1890. This is the Orange-Keysville Railroad right here, which is really unique. That's the one Jimmy was referring to earlier, and I was Vanna Whiting the sign. This here is the F&P/T&W. I have to believe, along with Bob, that the train may have done a maneuver like this at this point, and it's very distinct when you walk out there. This bridge, which, whoa, anybody who can see it. I didn't bring extra copies of this because I figured people from Farmville would love this, but this is the bridge, I believe, unless somebody knows better, looking northbound from Farmville, looking over the Appomattox. And the reason I believe that is because of the way the railroad is curved. When you look at all maps, the railroad kind of curves out like that across the river. So all that's left is a pylon either on this side or this side. You all know better than me. I've still never seen it. Spent my 40th birthday out there trying to find it. Couldn't. But awesome, awesome Farmville ties.
That's the postcard that was sold at Chapel, right? That was said in the file.
Great.
Okay.
So this is actually in the book over there. There's a lot of lawsuits and whatnot. This is actually a stock certificate that was issued to the county of Powhatan from Farmville Powhatan Railroad, which is really unique because obviously they were the faith and poverty, the tired and weary, never really made a profit other than in the first couple of years. So I doubt the county ever saw their money, and to prove it, there's all sorts of lawsuits. It's quite interesting. At this point, I noticed in the PowerPoint today when I was going through it, it kind of starts just looking at the book.
Yes.
This is a ticket that is owned by, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, somebody in the room. Don't mug anybody. That is the single most amazing piece of memorabilia I could ever imagine to own from this train. I don't know why, but that is really incredible. To me, it's the only one I've ever seen. Bob Flippin owns, well, sorry, Bob, I'm not trying to throw your business out there. There's a guy that I know that lives over there. He has the only, oh, he's gone. All right. Hey, so Bob has an employee pass that's just incredible. And to hold that piece of cardstock and just say, wow, this is 1891, It's just amazing. The book that I compiled starts off with a bunch of pictures like this where you can see timber was one of the largest producers of weight and shipping once the train actually did go past the Coleborough area and coming in from Powhatan, Cumberland, Farmville. So this is them loading the ship. This is a view of the ship obviously looking forward. The next slide, I believe, is a picture of the ship looking at it from the side. Yes. So, I mean, you're talking something in 1890 that's taking out a ton of lumber, ton of coal, taking it to, you know, New England, some over to Europe, tons of tobacco. We were a huge tobacco producing market, especially Tobaccoville, Virginia. It really did produce that much tobacco. This is part of that same story. Ultimately, this story that we're looking at ends with talking about how the rails were most likely ripped up because of the war efforts in England or France, and rumors have it that the rails of the entire railroad never made it, were sunk by a German U-boat, which I have no proof of that. Nobody does, but those urban legends are kind of what keeps you going. This is a picture, a really good picture of the train, and in fact, Ken, that's awesome, because this wheel right here, we have an example of. That may be, I believe that's Tidewater and Western, I'm not sure, but we have a wheel here present from the Bright Hope, slash, is the Bright Hope right in Clover Hill or no?
No, this is,
F&G. Okay. Got it. This is an awesome picture. There was 2 conductors in this day. We've now met one of their grandsons, which was quite an experience. However, the other one is this guy right here, E.B. Cheatham. And what's crazy is if you look up here at the top of this train, he's actually got deer antlers. So, I don't know the whole story, but rumor has it that he, you know, hit a deer and wasn't going to let a good deer go to waste and thought the antlers would look great up there. And quite frankly, you could cook the meat on the boiler. I don't know where I get these stories from, but, you know, they sound great, right? Especially from Powhatan. Here. Oh, hey, thanks, Jimmy. There you go. Boom, that was good work. This is Bermuda 100. You can see definitively how much smaller these lines are. It's really incredible when you look at pictures that people are like, man, this is from the narrow gauge, and you're like, that looks like it's 4 times wider than that guy. That's 4'8" inches. Narrow gauge would have been 3 foot, and Bermuda 100, to my knowledge, was never anything less than 3. Osborne's landing where it originally went was 4'8", but that is certainly narrow gauge track. You can see a narrow gauge train back there. They would have had train yards like this in other places too. Ken has identified where they had a siding which was a fix-it type of, you know, a maintenance facility, and that's where some of these springs and things that you see on the table came from, because they just kind of pitched it. I believe a bunch of that stuff over there is from the same exact spot.
Same picture over, I believe.
I want one of these clocks if anybody can buy them. For free. Bermuda 100 again, that's just a further out picture.
There it is, no dots on
The unfortunate thing, and no offense to anybody from Chesterfield County, but they're difficult to deal with from a lot of avenues. This particular area is owned by people that the Historical Society will say, oh, go talk to so-and-so, da-da-da-da-da, and they just don't really, some people don't care. That's okay, it's your land, whatever. Unfortunately, I want to see what you got there, because it would be awesome to be able to share it with people like y'all who are here to see it. But Bermuda 100 is quite protected, unfortunately, with people who don't want to go any further. This was actually where the seaboard, this is the Atlantic seaboard. There was multiple, like the electric railroad, all that would have crossed there at Chester. This here is a picture of the Tidewater and Western Railroad. employee pass. So 1917, so this would have been the last year of the railroad. B. Graves, who I believe was big into the post office routes after the fall of the railroad. So it's kind of interesting that he was an employee of the railroad and then kind of took advantage of their demise, per se. More pictures of Bermuda 100. I know at this part it kind of starts going through just pictures of the book. Did you want to just hit enter and hit on like the ones that... Does anybody have any questions so far? I mean, I'd way rather you, if you have one, go ahead and ask instead of wait till the end. Oh, this is great. Timetables. Two that I know that exist. This one and that one right there. And it's very unique because they were protective of these and they wanted them destroyed after a certain amount of time. This one was from the Farmville Herald. I believe I got it from Jimmy. And it shows in there the actual times for every single stop along with that one as well. In the book that I compiled that was completely for me in the beginning, I just put everything in there. So a lot of this is repetitive. It's, you know, it's telling the same stories written by a different person. Different vantage points, which do matter. One story written by a Longwood, not Hampton City, Longwood student in the 60s that there was no need to write a book on this railroad because he nailed it in like, I don't know, 3 paragraphs. Pretty incredible. That was at one point the owner, G.M. Wilson. He was not the one who was the owner at the end of the era. These are interesting photos to me, to say the least. It appears to be the train. You can see it says TW. Some of the dates conflict on the bottom, which, you know, I'm just presenting what I have that I believe may be what I think it is, for lack of a better explanation. But these are rails bringing the train in off the docks, and then it would either potentially spin, or that's a much better picture of it. But again, this one, it says Tidewater and Western, which it's not that it can't be, but I think the next one, if he has that picture in here, shows a date of like 1884, and it would have been the Farmville Powhatan before that. So some things like that, I'm not sure if it was just somebody transcribed it wrong. So just go with what you got, right? But you can see there, that's definitely a 3-foot. This is not 4-foot. Pretty awesome. All of Bermuda 100. There it is. 1882, Tidewater Western. Couldn't have happened, just being honest.
Are all those engines gone? Nothing's been...
They were all taken to some Petersburg scrap metal facility in 1917 during the dissolution of the company.
One of them ended up in Mexico.
Really?
Yeah, one of the stories in the book tells.
I know I kept you around for something.
Yeah, they all up and down the East Coast, they were sold at auction.
A lot of narrow gauge railroad engines as well as cars ended up in Alaska.
Oh. And now Hawaii had an aero gauge at one point as well. It's got a lot of patch on them. Oh, that's one of the more iconic photos. Most of you have probably seen that, but I think it's very unique that you can see a railroad tie of some sort on the front of the train. This individual is Maynard French. He ran the station in Tobaccoville, like Sunnyside area. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sunnyside Farms, but he would have ran that ticket booth. He has multiple stories in the newspaper and oral histories that I did include in there about him as well. We can pause it for 1 second. This is kind of hard to read, and it gets cut off because you can't fit everything on the right size pages, but this came close to me because Billy Bolt, who is the Powhatan Historical Society historian, is a good friend of mine. His son took the place of Michael T. Walter, who was the officer that was shot and killed in Mosby Court 2 years ago or so. And we found out today that his son's mother, so his ex-wife, is being put in hospice. So it's just kind of one of those sad scenarios. And he was going to be here tonight, didn't come because of the everything transpiring today. But that's a great story about his father and his grandfather. Nothing significant to me other than, again, the very good view of the steam locomotive itself.
Where would these locomotives been built?
It's a great question. At the time, it seemed like Pittsburgh, Springfield, Massachusetts, those types of places were really your hot spots for these. I never researched that part, I guess. It was more or less like, how was my house involved in the railroad, and then it just went from there. And it hasn't gotten quite that far yet.
That's just a little half of that article.
Yeah, this is actually not in Virginia, this is in Wisconsin. However, that's an example of how they would have muled the lumber to the train. Because, I mean, you got to think, if they're putting 14 tons on a train, I don't even know how they're getting it off. That match factory, some of that equipment, if it wasn't in pieces, I can't explain how it got removed.
That's the Longwood article.
This is the Longwood article, and it did get cut off on the side, so I apologize. But for those of you that get a chance, I think you have a better scan of that as well. It is, he really nailed it. Did a great job.
1961.
Yeah. That must be our official picture, Jimmy. I think we've seen it 3 times.
There is a blow-up part of the article, January 24th of 61.
Yeah.
Who wrote it?
His name was McClung. He went to Longwood. Evidently, he was a student, but it does mention the professor's name, I believe, was Bill.
Yeah, I think it does.
Because I was alone with her. I think one was all the way.
It would have been right up here.
Dr. James Weller, English 112 at Longwood.
But yeah, when I read that story, I was just like, wow, that was,
I went over to the Longwood College and went to the old Farmville Heralds and got a better copy of that, but it's not in this PowerPoint. But it's available, the whole story. And it's a pretty good story.
hey, here's our picture again.
That's just blow up the article, giving you the date. That's more of the article.
Based on the fact that I've bored everybody here, it's 8 o'clock, shortly thereafter. There are a couple of things I would like to show you in here, so if we can just kind of skip through this. Oh, sorry, that was one.
You can go back to that one.
It's all good. Oh, we'll just go with this. All right, so Fallsville's highlighted. This is really unique to me because personally, the store across the street from my house that we live in now, all 3 of us, my wife and other 2 kids, live right across the street from where B.C. Wilson shipped all his goods on the Farmville Powhatan. And here he was suing the railroad for the fact that tariffs were twice as expensive from Ballsville to Richmond as they were from Farmville to Richmond. And Ballsville was exactly the halfway spot. It made no sense. So I love that lawsuit. horrible photo, but man, it was significant to the people that saw it. I think you did. Yeah. That was as it would go through Sunnyside, Gray siding, through Cumberland County. So I mean, it's one of the only pictures that I've ever seen of this train in motion, which I think is unique. It also almost looks like the steam is going the wrong way, but I don't know. They were talking about how it would blow like Home Sweet Home or something as it would come by. There's another one of our favorite photos. But again, railroad tie. Still can't explain that because I've seen pieces, one of which is the Colborough coal factory that really makes me believe that there was a metal type of frame on the front of these trains, but awful lot of examples of the railroad tie being its bumper, so to speak. Man, I wish I would have had that, Jimmy. Saturday. Railroad tie bumper? I wrecked my car. Cool. Would have been a lot less damage, right? Okay, so this is where we enter a couple of the better pictures. Did we already touch on the? Oh yeah, we saw the East and West building. There's nothing else really that I think in here was imperative from the book. Is there anything that you wanted to show, Jimmy?
Not particularly.
I really love being here as long as anybody wants me to be here. So obviously I'm not going to continue talking and, keep everybody, but if you want to ask questions, if you want to see anything, that's why it's here. That's what I came for, because this is a passion of mine. I invited one of my very good friends to bring some of his absolutely incredible relics that you just can't find anywhere else. And I hope some of you will stick around and take a look at some of that. But just for the record, all of this is stuff that means something personally to me or personally to Ken. It's not stuff that's for sale. The only thing that is we were selling the book for the cost, and I have extra copies of this poster that I would sell if somebody would like one. I think I've got 7 of them. But hey, Ken, there's your house. Nope, sorry. You're going to have a whole bunch of new friends. Oh, and I'm really sorry that my best friends couldn't be here tonight. No, you know where I'm going with this, right, Jerry? I mean, you guys would have loved them. They just are the best. Poison ivy, ticks, and chiggers. Man, let me tell you, if you see me picking at my legs, it's because of chiggers, man. Oh, it's incredible. So stay out of the woods. I know I'm embarrassing you two. It's all right. Oh, hey, that's me. Can you go back one slide? This is very unique to Ken's neck of the woods. It speaks about the 69 people that died in 1867 on April the 3rd or 1st. I can't read that. 3rd. And burned for 14 years?
No, several months.
Okay.
They had pump water and put it out.
So people think that, well, number one, that was the single most casualties in any mining accident in the 1800s was in Chesterfield, and number 2 was also in Chesterfield in Midlothian. So very unique that Winterpock, man, those poor people. There was one that burned. You were talking about one that burned for a decade or something, or?
Oh, it's in trade.
Oh,
It's still on fire.
it's still on fire. Neat.
There's thousands across the world still burning. They can't put them out.
Huh. Don't want to move there.
One in Australia been burning over 1,000 years.
They call those volcanoes, right? book ticket. I have no idea where it came from. I think Bob Flippin took a picture of that offline because it was for sale for like $255. However, that would be an incredible piece of something to own as well.
Jerry, I'm gonna wrap up the meeting and let the slides keep
Yep.
going. and
Yep,
then
do
you
your
can,
thing. You tell me when to stop talking.
Let us have a drawing here, give away this door prize. You want to do the ticket?
Of course I do.
Read out the number.
All right, Jerr. All right, 643-8610. 643-8610. Hey!
Rick.
So, I real quick, I'm sorry. Real quick, I don't know how long Ken is going to stay, and I know that we have to take some time to line that stuff up, back and get it back in his car. So, anybody who does have questions, feel free to ask, but I would probably hit him before you hit me, because I'll stay all night.
Jimmy, I'd like to mention one
Yes.
thing. In Jimmy's presentation, he talked about the quality of the coal here being replaced by the coal in Pocahontas, Virginia. I've been to Pocahontas a couple of times, and it is quite memorable. The original coal mines there were all picked by hand and loaded into horse and buggy or mule and buggy or wagon. The ceilings in those mines were, if my memory is right, about the height of the top of the door there. And you could tour the mines, and when you looked up in the ceiling, you could see fossils of reptiles, tree stumps, snakes, embedded in the coal. And I think they probably have closed the tours now because the stumps and trees that became coal eventually, the ones that did not go to like 100% coal, they were falling out of the ceiling and were considered dangerous. Pocahontas is a very, very poor town, and the first time I ever went there, there was a stone church that had lead glass windows in it, and the ceiling was, the roof was caving in. The last time I went there, someone had removed the lead glass windows and they were restoring that building. For your information as well, that is where the mining people lived. Very poor mining town. Probably 30% of the buildings have been removed. On the opposite side of the mountain, which is Bramwell, West Virginia, Bramwell, West Virginia, and that is where the coal mine owners lived as well as the management. And there are a number of houses there that were built by Frank Lloyd Wright, which still stand today. Very interesting.
Yeah, there's one coal mine in West Virginia that's, I've forgotten how many years, but it seems like it's 60 or 70 years. Caught on fire, it's still burning, they have no way to put it out.
Right.
Jerry, we're gonna give you a vote.
Yay!
Think of us every day.
I call you every day.
That's true. All right, I'll let you, just kind of show everybody this stuff and we'll close the meeting. Thank everybody.
Anybody who wants to get off, obviously, go ahead.
Yeah.
was